Hi, I'm Elisa Sherman, and I'm the CEO of Ellementa, and this is the Ellementa Book Club. Every month, we are doing a Sunday morning or Sunday midday, or for some of you, Sunday afternoon or evening, virtual book club where we talk with an author about her book. To tell you the truth, we're actually doing Wednesdays and Sundays, different webinars and events, and happen to have a couple of other authors coming in on other days as well. So this is all part of our sheltering at home, working from home events. They're all free and they're all archived on our website. So make sure you register for at least one of them so that you can get in live and that you can also get the recordings after. And special, you will be entered to win a free book, a free copy of Elana's book, Women in Weed. Yeah. If you are on our list. So you can also go and join our list at ellementa.com/join. But if you've already registered formally for one of these events, you're on our list. So without further ado, let's talk with Elana Frankel of Women in Weed. Hey, Elana.
Hey, how are you? Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this.
Oh, I'm really excited to do this. And I just want to say, wow, how long have we known each other now? For a few years.
Yeah,
a couple of years. Well, especially in the cannabis industry years. It's kind of like dog years.
I know.
It must be like 21 years.
Feels a lot longer.
Yes.
For sure.
And I remember when we first met in a diner in New York City to talk about our projects. And you were, at the time, and still are, editing a magazine, Women in Weed.
Yep.
But tell us a little bit about your background before you got in the cannabis industry.
Sure. So prior to starting out in the cannabis industry above ground, it definitely had been underground for many, many years. But prior to starting above ground, I was in the publishing business. I was in magazines and then the digital world, creative director at One Kings Lane online. And I really was immersed into creating content, still photography, video, assets for websites, for editorial, for blogs, for TV commercials, parties, anything, partnerships. It just ran the gamut. And I was focused on, at One Kings Lane, creating a creative agency within the organization. And at one point, it was up to about 40 people, everybody from photographers and stylists to UX designers, and making sure that creative content to support any of the sales was live, sometimes twice a day. And then also making sure that all of the marketing, advertising, and editorial content was there. And it was a pretty big job and I loved it. And I was really incredibly honored to be able to put together a team of all the fun, creative people that I've met along the way in my life and be able to give them all jobs and really be able to play and create what is now the norm, which is editorial content and online for online sales. So it was great. It was fun. I was, living the life. I was flying here, flying there, producing photo shoots, like I said, television commercials, editorial. But it all came to a screeching halt about almost 6 years now. I was in Miami. I was at Art Basel with two of my girlfriends. We were there for a girls' weekend as well as some work. And we were having dinner. I ordered appetizers. I stood up and said, I'm not feeling very well. I'm going to go to the ladies' room. Next thing I knew, I woke up and I was having a CAT scan.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember this story. I'm glad that you're talking about it now, because when you first told me about it, it was still a little bit on the hush-hush.
It was on the hush-hush, and it was also because I hadn't fully recovered. I hadn't fully gotten back onto my feet. It took a really long time. But it would have taken a lot longer had I not discovered cannabis. So what happened was, I had fallen. I had fractured my skull. I had a 4-inch fracture in the back of my head. Impact was so strong and so forceful that it thrusted my head forward, and I bruised and hurt the whole frontal part of my brain as well.
Oh.
So I had this crack in my skull, these two big black eyes, and a giant inflated and inflamed head. My brain swelling was really intense, and I was presenting like a stroke victim. I couldn't speak. I was blah, 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 blah. I couldn't really move. Any kind of stimuli, light, sound, anything just sent my brain into a tizzy, and I just short circuited all the time. I also, I mean, I laugh about it now, but I also had hit my coccyx, which was so painful.
Oh, tailbone.
Yeah.
I had a tailbone injury. Yes.
It hurts, and it hurts for a long time.
Yeah.
And I had never hit it. And I just sort of was like, oh, that hurts. And then it kept hurting and kept getting worse and kept getting worse. So yeah, I found myself alone in a hospital room in Miami, unable to communicate, unable to be in a any kind of, like I said, light, sound, any kind of environment. I can laugh about it now, but at the time, the emergency room was so busy, they didn't have a private room, and so they put me in a room with with a Tourette's patient. So
wow.
on top of all of this, I had this, this poor man, this older gentleman, just every few minutes yelling out obscenities. And I kept trying to communicate to the nurses that it was just too much. Like I couldn't handle it. And then I learned the universal sign for morphine, which is this. So I kept doing this, and they kept pumping me up with morphine, and they kept giving me anti-seizure medication because they thought epilepsy runs in my family, so they thought I had an epileptic seizure. Oh. So I was really not only physically, mentally out of it, but I had just sort of been pumped up with all of these meds that my body just wasn't used to and didn't understand. So I was in quite the state.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. And it just happened like that, it's just like 1 second you're hanging out with girlfriends, and then the next you're sort of in this incredible flux and this state of emergency, basically.
Emergency, crisis, and then eventually almost a limbo, if you will. Because then you told me that you needed brain rest. And so for anybody who knows what brain rest is, it is literally no screens, no light, no sound, no talking, dark room, full-on brain rest. And you were a mom of young kids.
Right. So once I had gotten back to New York, I had seen a whole bunch of neurologists, and they all said the same thing. You have a TBI, you have a traumatic brain injury, you need brain rest. And that means, as you just said, dark room, no stimuli. And it could be minimum, they were saying a year, it could be up to 3 years.
Oh God.
Yeah. I can imagine. I had 2 small kids. I had a full-time job. I was, a wife, and I was laying in this bed in the dark, and it was crazy. It was weird. And for a doer and a type A personality, it was frustrating and crazy. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll just rest for a couple of days, and I'll beat this thing, give me a couple weeks, and, I'll be back. That's what I was thinking.
Right.
But little did I know that it would take me a really long time. But after a couple of days, my husband...
Hey, check your...
Oh, it's a scratch.
Yep.
So after a couple of days, my husband came to me and he's like, listen, we can't live like this. This is crazy. And at this time, I still couldn't speak. I was garbling, but we had sort of created a communication system.
Wow.
And I agree. Like, I was open to alternatives. He was open to alternatives. And I'm also a yoga teacher and have been since 2001. So I'm open to any kind of alternatives. And when he said alternatives to me, you think acupuncture, you think Reiki, you think meditation, and all of those things help for sure. But when he came back a couple of days later and said to me, I found something else, at that point I was open and I was desperate. So I was like, okay, whatever you do, like whatever you're talking about, let's hear. And he said, well, you're not going to like it. You're going to think it's strange, but it's cannabis. And I said, nope, not getting high. I was like, I'm already not of this world. He said, no, it's not THC. It's CBD. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. So you have to remember, this was almost 6 years ago in New York. We're a prohibition state. We had just had started the conversations about medical marijuana, let alone like any sort of other chemical compound or extract, let alone anything still at that point that was not legal. So once he explained it to me, once he educated me, and once I started educating myself a little bit more, as much as I could based on my state, I said, okay, let's do it. Let's try it. And again, it's one thing to sort of say, okay, let's do it. Let's try it. But you're in a prohibition state. And then you're sort of crickets chirping. Where do I get it? What do I do? Like, okay.
Yep.
So we were extremely lucky in that we had a lot of connections on the West Coast. My cousin has a medical marijuana farm. And we put out the word that we were looking for CBD specifically. We weren't looking for anything that had anything above the federal threshold, but that we really wanted to focus on CBD as a natural anti-inflammatory to see if we could get the inflammation down in my brain. We're really lucky. We had friends and friends of friends bring us and send us some incredible product, and it ranged from lotions and potions and topicals to tinctures, and we sort of found ourselves with a great sort of array of product. But then came the second challenge because all this great product came, and it came unlabeled and
no
directions. I had no idea about dosing. I had no idea what was going to affect me how. I knew that it was all non-intoxicating. I knew that I couldn't OD on it. I couldn't take too much, but I really did know that I wanted to find the optimal dosage for me so that I could start to feel better, that I could feel the relief.
Right.
And so then came phase 2 of the education. I had to spend time with these products and really start to play, experiment, figure it out. And just like I tell people now, I innately just went, started low and slow. I took small, tiny doses of different things at different times of the day, waited, see how I felt. And then if I needed more, I'd take a tiny little bit more, and then a tiny little bit more until I titrated until I found your dose.
And so what, just out of curiosity, because we always have to say, and you're going to have to move your thing again. Oh, sorry.
Every time I drink.
On your microphone side. Yeah.
Okay.
So everybody's dose is different. And that's the thing that we always emphasize, is that it's extremely individual. But just out of curiosity, what did you end up finding your right dose was as you were trying to heal from a TBI?
Well, not only was my dose going to be personalized and customized and just, for me, but I found that during different times of the day, I also changed my dosage. And I also found that after a while, certain things didn't work. Like I built up a tolerance that certain things didn't work as they did. And quite frankly, if I had 3 different, tea, let's say, all with the same dosage, the brands would be different and I would react differently. So sure. Milligrams of CBD in it, I still would have to say, okay, even though they all are the same dosage or they all feel like the same, whoops, like that didn't feel as it brands were different.
So it also depends on what else is in it. So a lot of the teas, they have other kinds of herbs. And
exactly,
so some
the
of
herbal
those
allies, for sure.
Exactly. That might make it stronger in some ways, absorb more quickly in other ways.
Yeah. And I knew from just who I am that I mostly go with things that aren't flavored. So I don't do floral. I don't do fruit. I don't do any kind of like layered on. Right. If I do, it's more of the mint side of the, or the...
Sure, like a peppermint or something.
Yeah. Or
you're talking about something that you take in, right?
Even if a tincture, an ingestible, or quite frankly, lotion, topical, the smell. So really, for me, I started with topicals because it seemed like the least scary.
Sure.
And honestly, my coccyx my tailbone still hurt. So it was really easy for me to say, okay, here's 3 different topicals.
Yeah.
And try that. And once I realized and understood I was finding relief, then I was like, okay, I feel comfortable. Now I'm going to start with tea. And the tea really was the thing that brought me the greatest relief and the most and the fastest. And it really helped me because I'm a tea drinker. Also the ritual of making the tea and also the sort of, I slowed down. There were steps I had to take. It actually helped sort of train the brain a little bit as well. Nice. I had to remind myself how to make a cup of tea. And once I did that, once I went through the ritual and ceremony and drank, it was a whole process that made me more meditative and calmed me down and quieted me down. And it really helped.
It's like a process of healing. It's the ritual of healing.
100%. And then the final thing that I tried at the time was a vape. I wasn't going to try vaping until the end. I just wanted to be comfortable and see what it was like. And I'm not really a vapor. So
vaping flower or vaping concentrate?
Concentrate. At the time it was concentrate. So I found one that I really liked. I knew the farmer. I knew it was clean. I knew it was pure. I knew the supply chain from seed to shelf. So I was really comfortable. I also knew where the vape pen was made. It was made in the United States. So I was really careful about that. And that also brought me great relief. And it wasn't until much later that I tried tincture because, it was the last thing I tried. And it was just a personal choice. Yeah. A lot of the tinctures that I had found or seen were flavored. And I didn't want that. And a lot of the ingestibles, the edibles were chocolate or
candies,
gummies and sugar. And I didn't want the processed sugar. At the time of my TBI, processed sugar was a big trigger. Wow. Anytime I had any kind of processed sugar, I would take 10 steps back.
Whoa.
It was really interesting.
Well, it's so telling. I mean, we all really do know innately that sugar is very bad for us on so many levels and very addictive and affects our body and our brains.
Yeah.
So
it was 2 things. It was the processed sugar, and it was still, and it still is to this day, croissants. It's really strange. When I eat a croissant, it still feels and tastes like I'm eating cardboard. It's the weirdest thing.
Wow.
Yeah. There are certain things. And for a long time, I lost my sense of smell and taste. Taste has come back. Yeah. Because the bruising in the front part, the taste has come back, not 100%, but a lot, but smell is still elusive. I still have not gotten my sense of smell back. And it's super curious. And that's a whole other book that I could write about losing your sense of smell.
Speaking of book, can you hold your book up?
Yes. So, well, I'll tell you first. Well, here it is. Here it is. But first, what happened was when I sort of was better and able to get up and get back to work a couple of days a week, 1 day a week, 2 days a week, finally 5 days a week. And by the way, it wasn't a year, it was about 3 months. And I 100% know that it's that CBD that helped, that sped along the process and brought me relief. So at the time I got back to work, the company had been sold to another company. I didn't want to move on to the larger company that had bought out One King's Lane. So I said I would help my team transition and then I would step back and move on. And I did. And I came home one day and I said, okay, I'm going to start a CBD business. I believe this is great. The product is amazing. This is going to be huge. And this was about 5 years ago. And my husband was like, amazing. I totally support this. I've seen it, but it's illegal.
Yeah.
I totally hear you. And he was like, okay, but you realize it's illegal. I'm like, yeah, totally hear you. And we went back and forth. And finally I said, okay, you know what I'll do is I'll spend some time educating myself, really educating myself, talking to doctors, talking to cultivators, talking to extractors, talking to activists, talking to politicians, talking to people who've been doing this for a long time, and really immersing myself in that part of the world in a very formal way. Because like I said, I've been underground and I had been, in the world for a while, but really, really teaching myself and really self-educating.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I started doing these sort of Tupperware parties where I would go to women's houses and sit with, the lady of the manor and her 10 friends. And we would talk about cannabis and we would talk about THC. We would talk about CBD. We would talk about, the use of cannabis on the spectrum from adult use recreational all the way to hardcore medicinal and wellness, all that wellness in between. And so I really I got the formal education, but I also started to do these. It turned out to be mini focus groups. And I also
Anecdotal experiences.
Exactly. And also what they were looking for with what they were looking for in a cannabis experience now that it is emerging as a legal industry, and what that looks like to them, and what it feels like to a young woman in her 20s, a woman in her 40s, and a woman in her 70s. And those are different ages and stages, which they're going to look at cannabis in different ways.
Yeah.
So,
and cannabis will react in their bodies and with their brains 100%. In different ways because of estrogen or lack
hormones, of hormones, environment, tolerance, all of that. Correct. Yeah. And nobody was talking about that.
Yeah.
Not very
well, that's why we started Ellementa.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why there was so much synergy when we had that conversation in the diner.
Yeah.
So I ended up starting to bring some product with me to these Tupperware type parties, and women were interested, and we were able to, test them in a very safe environment in their homes, and people asked questions, and they tried topicals, they tried the tea, and then they started buying them. They started buying product, which was great. And then I threw up a website. I was like, okay, if you want to reorder, or if I can't be everywhere. So, here's a typical e-commerce site.
Indigoandhaze.com.
Indigoandhaze.com. I hit publish the first time a couple of years ago, and we were promptly taken down. And then, then we went back up on a different host, and then we were taken down, and then credit card. And then anyway, once the Farm Bill passed and once it became less illegal, we were able to go up and put up the website and have a proper e-commerce experience for customers. And so when I started Indigo and Haze, there were 3 ideas to the business: access to safe product that I had vetted and curated from seed to sale, education and inspiration. So the access part was up, the website was up. The second part was the education. I had educated myself. I had met all of these incredible women from, our conversations, you and I, and all of these doctors and all of these scientists and researchers and all of these growers. And so I went to a publisher and I said, listen, I've been in magazines my whole life. There's something here. I want to start a magazine called Women in Weed. And
cool. I didn't know how it happened. That's awesome. Okay.
And because honestly, when I went to the newsstand, there were maybe 2 cannabis magazines, the OG, High Times, and maybe one other, and they all sat in the men's interest section of the newsstand. And there was no one speaking to me, to my friends, to my people. So I said to the publisher, can we do this? And he said, you know what? Let's try an issue. He was in the business of doing special interest publication, SIPs, which is a 1 issue, no advertising, You put it together, you put it on the newsstand. It sits on the newsstand for about 3 to 6 months, everywhere from Barnes and Noble to Walgreens, CVS,
Walgreens,
all
yeah.
over the place. And the price of the magazine is a little bit higher, $13.99. But like I said, you get an ad-free. It's almost like a journal more than a magazine experience. So we put up an issue, and it did phenomenal.
Right.
It did really great. People loved it. Women loved it. Men loved it. The information was there for them. And it really opened up an illegal industry in a way that hadn't really, I mean, for so long, the industry was legal and it was so closed for obvious reasons. And now through science and research, but also, as you said, anecdotal evidence and storytelling, people were able to see and read people's stories and say, oh, wait, I have those skills. I can easily transfer them from this industry to cannabis.
Yeah.
It's not, it opened up the world to people.
Yeah.
And then we did a second issue, and then we did a third issue. And then Simon & Schuster came and said, hey, why don't we take the first 2 issues and make it into a book?
Oh, cool.
So, a few weeks ago, middle of March, Women in Weed, the book came out. It's challenging to launch a book during this pandemic, but we've been very, crafty and scrappy.
I saw something on CNN.
Yes, we just a couple of days ago had a big story, CNN Health, which really was amazing. And Lisa Dreyer is a great writer. So it was really a great bump in sales, which was very nice. So now we've got the access going, we've got the education going. And then this third part of the inspiration, it really was driven by this idea that none of the imagery or the branding or the businesses out there felt like not only were they not talking to women, but they weren't really talking to women's issues. And that ranges from everything from the inequities that were happening in the industry for women, and particularly women of color, as well as we said before, the fact that cannabis really affects women differently than men. Yeah. And so there wasn't really a lot out there at the time, but also the inspiration also went into this idea of design, and that design has added value to the process, so that visually, the visual identity of the company, as well as the branding, as well as everything else that's out there, should really start to reflect good design, basically. Beautiful packaging, simple packaging, colors, fonts, all of those things, the typography, all of those things, and all the editorial that goes along with that, all the stories, the visual sort of part of the storytelling needs to be strong, and quite frankly, not beer boobs and bongs, or babes boobs and
bongs.
Yeah.
And that, yeah.
And there's a place for it. I'm happy to have it there.
And there's a huge market for that.
Yeah, and I'm happy to have it there. But there's a whole part of the spectrum that needs to be reflected. And so that was really important to me, and quite frankly, to a lot of women. And we see now there are so many great women and brands out there who are focusing on design and focusing on really making sure that women see themselves reflected.
And storytelling.
And storytelling.
And an amazing
super important. Yeah, super important.
So tell us what we can expect to find in your book. You said it was basically the content from the first 2 issues, but what's in it?
Yeah. So there's some great information, like a primer. There's really good, just basic foundational information, definition of words, explaining THC versus CBD, explaining hemp versus marijuana. I'm also extremely focused on language, and there's a lot of movement to separate or decouple hemp from the cannabis definition. And I want to make sure, my nose is running. I want to make sure that the idea of cannabis includes both hemp and marijuana.
Sure.
And so there's
Right.
language issues, and there's visual, aids to sort of let you see what an actual plant looks like, because lots of people haven't actually ever seen
the plant itself. Mm-hmm.
So there's a primer, and then there's great scientific and research. We focus on a couple of doctors who are doing great research out of Washington State University, here in New York, Dr. Chin. So there's a lot of.
All right, hold on a second. You said Dr. Chin, but we have to be a little more specific because not everyone knows who.
Yeah, I'll get to that for a second. But
okay, because she's my co-author, so I know.
Don't worry, she's getting there. She's getting there.
Okay.
But so she and her colleagues,
Dr.
around the country, are really focusing on understanding how THC, how CBD not only reacts in the female body, but also how we can move forward understanding the relationship. And so Dr. June Chin is one of the women in the book that really is, in my opinion, and I know you'll agree with me, having authored a book with her, she really is on the forefront of understanding that relationship between the plant and women and their bodies, and quite frankly, their mind as well, because it's not only a physical, but it's also spiritual, emotional, mental connections as well. And so there's that. So we've got the primer, we've got the science, and then we have really great storytelling. So these are women who have been in the industry for a while. They've been growing. They've been extracting. They've been investing. They've been lawyers. They've been, they really have been part of the culture and the community and the industry for a long time. And they tell their stories about how they got into the industry. They give advice. They tell their stories about what they do. And it's incredibly effective to sort of be able to see yourself, or sort of see your colleague, or see your friend, or just frankly see another woman doing this, and doing it in a way that is normalized.
Right.
For me, normalization comes through storytelling. The more stories we hear, the more knowledge we have, the more women that are doing it, the more normal it becomes.
Right.
And so it's really great to read these stories, and they're extremely passionate. They're passionate about what they do. They're passionate about the plant. They're passionate about healing. And they're also passionate about having fun. It's really an incredible array of women. And it was really important too that the magazine and the book reflect all women. And it definitely does. I wanted all women to be able to find a voice and have their voice represented. Then there's real sort of practical information, about wellness, about getting a CBD massage, about skin treatments, about different strains, about all the sort of practical things you would need to understand if you walk into a dispensary or a spa and someone says, "Oh, do you want a CBD treatment, or do you want to try this strain, or whatever it is?" What's the ratios? Does it matter if it's indica sativa anymore? All of those issues.
Right.
And then in the magazine, we really took a strong activist political stance as well. So we talk a lot about social inequity. We talk about the history and women who have been working in the industry, whether they're no longer with us or still working, and in the movement, and really focusing on their contributions over the years and making sure that they're just as heard as the men who have been so vocal in the past.
Do you happen to have the magazine handy near you to hold that up as well?
I don't. It's downstairs.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah, I should have.
That's okay. Well, it looks the cover.
It looks very similar. It looks very similar. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there illustrations inside, photos inside?
Oh no, there's all photos.
Okay.
So
if you want to hold it through some of the.
So you can see some of the.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And this is one of my favorite stories in the book, and was also in the magazine. Because part of the other sort of mandate I had was women 65 and over, and seniors in weed. And so it was really an interesting, and continues to be an interesting group of women. A lot of women in this age group are really open to trying it, but really are a little nervous about it. Sure. And so one of my favorite stories is it is this woman's medical marijuana journey. At 72 years old, she's diagnosed with ovarian cancer. She has to go through chemo. And she goes to a dispensary for the first time and tries medical marijuana. And it happens to be my mother.
Oh, it just so happens that was your mom's story, huh? Okay.
Because I really believed, and I went with her and I went through the process with her.
So this is after your injury.
Oh yeah, this was just a few years.
Okay.
2-3 years ago. Okay. And so, she said to me when, I went to all her doctor's appointments, and when she first was talking to the physician's assistant and I brought up medical marijuana, my mom was like, but then we started talking and she knew that I had used cannabis to heal and help bring relief to my TBI. And so she was a little bit more calm about it. And then we talked about it a little bit more. And then we went to a dispensary. We went to an all-women's dispensary here in New York.
In New York City?
Yeah, Etain.
Etain, yeah.
She felt very comfortable knowing that, it was seed to sell verticals. And she was really happy to walk into a place where it was all women. They understood ovarian cancer. They understood what she was going through. And she ended up with a 1-to-1 ratio. And
what kind of product was it? A tincture?
So here was the thing. So we were sitting there, and this is part of it. Part of the story she tells. There are two funny things. The first is because we get there and I say to her, okay, there are different ways that, there are different protocols. You can use different things. So she tries a vape pen and she could not figure out how to use it. Like, hold the button down. You got to wait till it lights up and then you got to charge it. And she was like, this is too much.
Yeah.
And then she did not want to do an edible. She was like, I don't know what dose. I don't know. So I finally said to her, okay, look, there's a spray. It's like a tincture, but it's a spray. It's for under the tongue. It's sublingual. And she was sort of like, what? And then I said, it's like Banaka. So if you remember in the 70s, like the little Banaka spray, and it was mint flavored. So I said, it's like Banaka. And she's like, oh, I love Banaka. So I was like, okay, great. So we got her the spray. And the pharmacist at the time was so sweet. She said, she was so patient. She said, listen, why don't you just try one now? You're in a safe environment. You're with your daughter. You guys are going to lunch after this.
THC, by the way? THC?
It was 1-to-1. It was a 1-to-1.
Okay, 1-to-1.
Yeah, 1-to-1.
Yep.
And so she was like, she sprayed. And she just did one spray because we were starting, low and slow. And so we left and we were walking to lunch and she's like, you know what? I don't feel anything. I was like, give it some time. We get to the restaurant and she orders an avocado salad. And a few minutes later, the waiter comes and brings this big, beautiful avocado salad. And she takes a bite and she pauses and she looks at me and she closes her eyes and so dramatically, puts her hand on her heart and is like, this is the best avocado salad I have ever had in my entire life. And I was like, I think it's working. And it was great for her because not only did it alleviate all of the symptoms, the side effects of chemotherapy that she was worried about, the nausea. As a matter of fact, after every chemo session, she actually ate. She was actually really hungry, and she usually had barbecue, which was really amazing. But
oh, wow.
She realized that it helped her immensely with her anxiety. So
right.
I think that was something she wasn't expecting, that the anxiety of, the anxious feelings that she had surrounding not only having cancer, but going through this process, her hair falling out, all the side effects, the sort of, physical, emotional, spiritual changes. It really helped her manage and alleviate and release some of that. And I think she was really grateful for that.
Yeah, we did just the other day, we did a webinar with a doctor out of Ohio, a cannabis physician. who specifically spoke about the connection between pain and anxiety.
Yeah.
And the ways that THC, CBD, just cannabinoids in general, cannabis can address both of them.
Yeah.
And then she also had brought up cancer patients because anxiety is not always talked about. You're always hearing about chemo and nausea. But the anxiety is a very big piece. And the more anxious you are, it can exacerbate nausea. It can exacerbate pain. It can create, this is what I just learned. So I love sharing what I just learned. Anticipatory pain, which is where you think it's going to hurt a lot. And that whole thought process creates pain sensation.
It's also fear. It's also because it's fear of the unknown, but also fear is, especially when you are thinking about it so much and you're living in your head, you think about things that haven't even happened yet.
Right.
And you label it as painful. You label it as, anxiety, you label it as such. And so I think part of the process of medical cannabis is to sort of relieve your brain of going in that direction. And really calming and clearing. It's very similar to meditation, and calming and clearing the mind so that you can make better decisions about your sort of physical presence. And
the other thing,
really important.
Yeah, the other thing too is sleep. That if it can help you sleep, because anxiety is keeping you up, pain is keeping you up, feeling ill is keeping you awake, then you feel worse. Because you're not getting enough sleep. But if you can use cannabis to get sleep, I'm sure with a traumatic brain injury, they told you that sleep was incredibly important.
Yes, sleep was incredibly important, continues to be incredibly important to me. It was strange because to this day, even, I can't tolerate a lot of THC. It really sends me... it's almost like my brain goes into fractals. It's sort of like it's a strange sensation, and so I really have to watch my and make sure that the products that I'm using are really, really, really low in THC and are really higher in CBD. And I just started working with CBG a little bit to see if there's a difference, and doing that with a tincture. And I'm still experimenting. Yeah, I'm still experimenting. It's giving me super crazy weird dreams. Which is
are you sure it's the CBG, or is it life in quarantine? Really, I've heard that's happening a lot.
I know, but you know what? When I don't take it, I don't have them. I thought that too. So I've been testing like 1 day on, 2 days off, whatever it is. And I can tell you, it's
the CBG.
For sure.
Interesting.
Yeah. But with the CBD, I'm fine and I sleep and it's great. But I will tell you though, that through all of this process, and especially when I was doing those Tupperware parties and the sort of, mini focus groups, the 3 things that women said over and over again, in different orders, depending upon their ages, but it was chronic pain, anxiety, and sleep. Those were the 3 things that women really were looking to cannabis to help relieve.
We found the same thing.
Issues were. And, yes, chronic pain, like you said, affects the sleep, affects, the anxiety. And it might be that that's the sort of, big nut to crack. But those were definitely the 3 things. And depending upon your age, and like women in their 70s and 80s was all about chronic pain.
Yeah. We always say sleep is the nut to crack. If you start getting enough sleep, and if you think about it, THC, CBD, cannabis in general, not only can help you relax, get to sleep, lessen the pain or lessen the attention you pay to your pain, it also helps heal the brain, as you know. So it's got neuroprotective qualities. So you can get trapped in that vicious cycle of no sleep, chronic pain, anxiety, no sleep. I mean, just keep on going into a loop. You can break that cycle with some cannabis. I'm curious, 2 things. One is just a brand product question. Are you familiar with Highland Pantry? Their
No.
products?
No.
Ooh, you should know about them. So they're California based. So next time you're in California, they their tagline was that it was cannabis microdosing for boomer babes.
Mm-hmm.
They're really geared toward the more mature woman, and their ratios. They have a mini, a midi, and a more. The three different versions. They're mints. Very subtle. I think it's all 1-to-1, but it's increasingly more. 3 milligrams, 3 milligrams, 6, 9, 9. I believe that's what they divvy it up. It could be a little bit higher, but the idea is very little and very even in terms of the ratio. So it's a really, really nice product, particularly for mature women. The second question is the second thing I was going to mention to you. This one actually is a question. Being a mom. You are a mom. How old are your kids?
They're 10 and 12.
Okay. So there's a lot around moms who use cannabis products. And obviously you've been writing about it, talking about it, consuming. And how do you manage that with kids? 10 and 12, those are tweens, right? Almost teens. How do you manage that?
Well, it looks like we only have about 13 minutes, so this could be a 3-hour conversation.
I know.
I'm pretty sure that it would, spark giant conversations. There are two things, mothering and pregnancy, when it comes to cannabis, that drives people bananas.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of every mother is different, and everybody's parenting style is different. I only know what works for me. And how I have approached it. I have been very honest with my kids. And I've been very honest with them because to me, cannabis is a therapeutic healing plant. And we are a family of plant people. And we turn towards plants more than traditional medicines. We definitely balance both, but if I have to go for one thing first, it's an herbal based remedy.
Sure.
And they know that their grandmother was taking medical marijuana during chemotherapy. They know that I took CBD and take CBD every day. What they also know is that it is adult use. They are very clear in understanding that a child's brain is still developing and that it is not something that they should be experimenting with or using on any level, recreational use or therapeutic, because they don't need it.
Right.
It's not something that they need. It's something that I need. It's something their grandmother needs. It's something that other people in the family need for other reasons. But they have an understanding of it like any other plant. When they have stomach aches, we drink ginger tea. They love to pick fresh mint from the garden and make tea from it when they need a little pick-me-up. So I think that there's all different ways to introduce it and then understand that this is how we as a family are using it, and that my book, my business, and the products that I sell are for people who need it, and that it's not,
Well, it's not something for, like you said, the developing brain. The way I've always said it with my kids is, once you're 25 and older, you can make your decisions if you're living in a legal state, what you can and can't do based on the laws. But until then, a brain under 25 years of age is still in the midst of developing, and that it can cause more damage than any good if you don't need it. Now, if you do need it, and if you are underage and you do need it, there are things that you can do, your family can do, your parents can do,
and doctors
can do to get you the access you need.
And that it's truly a medical need at that point. They definitely know about cannabis and epilepsy with children. They definitely know about cancer and cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, and it's a curious maneuver. There's definitely, I definitely, it's kind of funny and fun to watch me at PTA meetings or when I'm introduced to somebody and they ask me what I do.
What do you say?
I have to read the room. I definitely read the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
I definitely talk about, that I write about cannabis, that I have a cannabis business.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely getting more open about it because it's much more tolerated than it was 5-6 years ago when I first started. So it's definitely, though, read the room,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely the same way. And I still use my maiden name professionally, which kind of helps a little bit because with anything to do with the family, I'll use my married name. And so when they Google, it doesn't always match up, and it just feels a little bit.
You Google me, I'm all over that.
Yeah, I think I'm all over it. Well, heck, my 12th book was Cannabis and CBD for Health and Wellness.
Yeah.
It's a little bit hard to avoid now. But I did go through it early on, that fear of being labeled, or I even set up a completely different LLC because I was afraid of mixing my non-cannabis and my cannabis business, not just in name, but in legal entity. Yeah. Thinking that if anything was seized or if I was investigated or something weird like that, that it would not affect my non-cannabis business. Now it's just a hassle that I have 2 LLCs.
Like I said, that's a whole other hour of, conversation and the sort of cultural, social, emphasis, or not emphasis, but the not even stigma, but just
the experience of it, and how it,
how it's manifested itself, and how people are seeing you, and what you're projecting, and how you're projecting it, and it's fascinating.
It is.
Getting back to my kids, they definitely know. They definitely understand. They also know, public versus private. They're not yapping all.
They're not shouting it from the rooftops.
But they definitely know that I'm there for healing, and help, and making sure that not only are people having access to good, clean medicine, but that they're educating themselves. It's, educating before they medicate, and really making sure, because education. I can't emphasize it enough, that the more you know, the better your cannabis experience is going to be.
Yeah, it's so true. Because I think everybody who has had a bad pot experience, which often is with edibles, because it's so hard to dose, and you either forget what you've taken and take more when you shouldn't, or you think, I feel nothing because it's been 20 minutes, and so you take more. So anyone who's had that bad experience, it really does color your perception for quite a long time. And even despite laws and stigmas and all of those things, sometimes it's just that visceral bad experience that keeps you from trying it again. And so that's one of the things.
The THC to CBD ratio is challenging. And honestly, I will emphasize it again, somebody hands you a joint and is like, here, smoke this. You have no idea what you're, or here, eat this or spray this. But you are going, or your husband, your boyfriend, your male friend is going to say, oh, it's fine. I did it. Look at me. I'm fine. It's going to affect you so differently.
Right.
And if, like you said, one bad experience or one challenging experience, and you're just like, oh, I can't do it anymore. Yeah. But it really matters what you take, how you take it, and when you take it.
So if you had to sort of parting words for women who are interested in cannabis, if we can have words on 2 fronts. One is if they're interested in trying cannabis or just CBD for their health, what would you say? And then if they want to get into the industry, what would you say?
Well, if you want to try it, the first thing is education. And obviously you would buy Women in Weed.
Of course.
And read it.
Wait, hold it up and hold it. You keep on flashing it.
Obviously, you
There you
would
go.
buy this and read it for educational purposes. But also, I was really a proponent of having conversations with friends.
Yeah.
And especially now where CBD is so prevalent and everyone, I feel like, has tried it. Having a conversation, what did you use? How did you use it? How did you feel? What do you think? Talk to your healthcare provider, talk to your doctor, talk to your healthcare practitioner, whoever it is, and say, listen, I'm thinking about trying this. I'm on this medication. Is it going to affect it? Is there going to be any kind of, conflict there? Or is it going to enhance the experience? Whatever it is, have those conversations first before you just walk into a store or go online, and make sure that you not only trust the brand and trust the site, but also know that if you need information on that product, the brand should be able to provide you with a certificate of analysis that will show you this is what ingredients are in there, this is how much CBD is in there,
Percentages.
that the label that you're reading reflects the truth of what's in there and what's not in there. Because it's really important that you get a good, clean product that is really, truly CBD and not yes. So
Good.
that's that.
Okay.
To get into the industry, so there are two things about the industry. One is if you think you're going to get into the industry because it's a booming industry and everybody's making money and it's, money, and no, it's an industry. It's an industry of business like any other industry in business, albeit it is changing, emerging, going from illegal to legal. It's not always so straightforward, and it changes constantly. So you really have to be able to pivot. You have to be able to change with the times. You have to know the regulations in your state. You have to know the changes that are happening. You really have to understand that the industry is it's like building an airplane as it's flying.
Yes.
And it's really important that you're able to work with that and be that kind of person that's dealing with change all the time. And if that's interesting to you, and it definitely is interesting to me. It keeps you sharp and keeps you moving. It's never boring and it's never the same thing twice.
Yeah.
But I would say, if you read a story in Women in Weed and you see somebody, a woman, and you're like, wait a second, that's kind of what I do in this industry, and I can transfer it to this industry. Send her an email. I think that there's really an incredible camaraderie industry, and really wanting, from what I've seen and what I've experienced and who I am, I want good people in this industry. I want this industry that's just starting to really solidify and become, what it could be. I want to see the best people. I want to see thoughtful leaders. I want to see kindness. I want to see aggressive business. But I also want to see people who are going to pay attention to the issues, not only revenue, but social equity, but about the history of the plant, but about the, and all of the things, farming and cultivation and purity of product, and truth and authenticity. And so I think reaching out to other women in the industry is by far the best way. And just saying, hey, I'm interested. This is what I do. Do you have any ideas? Talk to this person. And the network is strong, and the tentacles are long. So you speak to one person, they speak to two people, and then it builds, and suddenly you find yourself having a job. Now, if you want to start your own business, that's a whole other different story. And honestly, I don't know if I can do that in less than 60 seconds. So you'll have to have me on again to have a whole other small business, because that's a whole other
Well, most of the women who tune in to our webinars are looking for wellness. And so this was a wonderful hour of hearing your story and finding out how CBD actually helped you from something quite dramatic. I mean, a traumatic brain injury is a major, major injury. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I'd like you to hold up your book one more time, please. It's so important to do that. Hold on. And I did a screenshot. Yay! Okay, wait. Hold it up one more time. I need to do one
Oh,
more screenshot. This is all live, of course. I need to see your face. Come on.
oh.
No, not your eyes. There you go. Got ya. All right, perfect. Women and Weed is the book. Women and Weed is also the magazine that you can find at Barnes & Noble, Walgreens, CVS, etc. Indigo and Haze is the website, indigoandhaze.com.
Haze.
Haze. And Elana Frankel, thank you so much for being here on the
Thank
Ellementa Virtual
you.
Book Club.
Thank you so much. So good to see you again, as usual.
It's good to see you too. And I just noticed you have Kermit the Frog in the background.
I know. My husband's a toy designer. It's his.
Well, that is wonderful. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for being here. We really appreciate it. The Ellementa Virtual Book Club. Every Wednesday and Sunday, we have an expert or an author at 12 noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, talking about wellness. So we look forward to seeing you again.